For the past 2 weeks, TF2 has essentially become bot-free. Everyone's happy, legit player numbers are up over 50%, and we can finally relive the feeling of 8 AM Badwater lobbies without constant aneurysms. Unless you're fighting a vac medic. However, it all seems a bit too good to be true right now. The longest period of bot-free TF2 just so happens to pop up right before the summer update, and right after a giant internet brigade breathing down Valve's neck. That is quite convenient timing. Don't get me wrong, these anti-bot measures are the sharpest and most proactive that we've ever seen, and I think comparing them to the efficacy of the ban waves we've gotten in prior years kind of undersells the changes being made. In fact, the new support page kind of points in the direction of this being a long-term trend. Why launch something like this if it wasn't intended to be used in the future? That being said, Valve's half-decade absentee father routine has justifiably damaged our trust. We all have at least a twinge of worry that we're getting collectively hoodwinked. That Valve are putting up a facade of initiative for just long enough until the summer update brings in the check. Only for the bot hosters to find a workaround 2 weeks later, and there goes another millennium of Valve playing dead. For this reason, many have advocated that we boycott the summer update until we're given further evidence that these conditions will last. This would work as added pressure to dissuade Valve from falling asleep at the wheel. What do I think of this idea? Well, I actually completely support it, and here's why. Okay, first, let's talk about why a boycott wasn't the centerpiece for the original campaign on June 3rd. It's very irrelevant to the here and now, so I'll be running through it fast, but here's an explanation. The avalanche of bad PR alongside a petition was a widely accessible theme that could appeal to everyone regardless of player status, monetary investment, temperamental differences, or whatever else. It became evident very quickly that if supporting Fix TF2 mandated promoting a boycott, the turnout for the movement was going to be far lower. A lot of TF2 YouTubers, non-TF2 YouTubers, streamers, workshoppers, brand accounts, the voice actors, former TF2 alumni with no financial stake in the game, and current TF2 alumni who wouldn't boycott regardless wouldn't have come out in the same numbers than if that aspect was left to personal choice. Now, if the boycott method actually gave us a good shot at a bot fix, all of that could be forgiven. So let's test that theory. Now keep in mind these numbers aren't official, they're ballpark to hell and back, but it's the best we got. If TF2 makes around 15 million a year on the high end, and say, I don't know, 80% of that revenue comes from the first 30 days of the Halloween, summer, and Christmas updates, that would leave $3 million shared between the non-update related months, or about $1/3 per month. Now Valve's yearly revenue ballparks around 10 billion, which means they make $1/3 about every 18 minutes. So even if we were able to boycott like 50% of all TF2 transactions within that time period, which is an extremely optimistic number to begin with, that would translate to only 9 minutes of revenue across the entire month of June. Give or take a minute or two, but that's the ballpark. Now, I'm no fucking Doctor Strange, but I think it's obvious to anyone with a pulse that Valve wouldn't quit their 5-year apathy nap to start building a state-of-the-art anti-cheat over revenue that Gabe Newell would literally make back during his morning shit. Basically, both options had astronomically low odds of achieving our goal. However, one of them had the tertiary benefit of getting millions of extra eyes on our cause, thanks to having no barrier to entry, no ideological buy-in, no commitments or sacrifices needed to participate, and a generally more applicable theme that fans both new and especially old could relate to. This allowed us to cast the biggest net we possibly could to give us the exponential growth required for movements to take off in the first place, like one big clout cobra eating its own tail. This resulted in much higher widespread support from both creators with massive platforms and the audiences who make up those platforms, be they TF2 focused or TF2 adjacent. And unless you believe that losing Valve 9 minutes of revenue would have been the catalyst for them to act, then quite frankly, we didn't lose anything by going this route. However, all of that reasoning died on June 4th. By that point, we'd milked all the added exposure that we couldn't have gotten otherwise. The tsunami of evidence toppled as many timelines as possible, and now we could experiment with other methods. The next obvious step was a boycott for the upcoming summer update. Because one, if you're gonna go after Valve's revenue, do it at a time when they're actually making some, and two, we had Valve cornered. If Valve wanted to release the summer update shortly after Fix TF2, there were only 3 ways they could have responded. Either A, drop the update without saying a word about what just transpired, which would be so unbelievably insulting that the community would immediately go scorched earth on Valve as a company. B, drop a response before or alongside the update, which probably would have been some PR bullshit, but some acknowledgement is better than nothing. Or C, they could cancel the update altogether. Unlikely, but definitely a possibility. Forcing Valve into this conundrum was always going to be of use, but as it turns out, that wasn't the full story. Apparently, there was a fourth option on the table that none of us actually considered. They could fix the game. Yeah. Who would have thought? Now, as mentioned, much of the community is reluctant to forgive Valve quite yet, hence the whole modern boycott fiasco. And in my opinion, the conditions for such an effort have been transformed to the point where I believe its potential effectiveness has increased significantly, and not for the reason you might think. It's kinda shocking to me how basically no one has talked about why, so allow me to plead my case. First, apparently this is a hot take. I think depriving Valve of just a couple hours worth of revenue isn't the green bullet that people seem to think it is. It's a well-known fact that Valve has the highest employee to revenue ratio of virtually every big tech company out there. A statistic that would be extremely impressive if there was any presumption that they were actually maximizing on their potential. All of Valve's IPs are being left out to rot. TF2 can't even get a strange Dragon's Fury for fuck's sake. If you're a company who's concerned with perpetual growth, it's always better to hire more people to make more products to get more money, to hire even more people to make even more products to get even more money. Valve is seemingly unwilling to do this at a macro scale. And because of this, labor is a scarce resource within their company, and they'd much rather allocate it to their big ticket moneymakers. That infamous quote from Eric about how Valve is stretched too thin, he's probably right. The bullshit part about it is that Valve could use the billions of dollars they make to hire more people, not that their current predicament is situationally untrue. Sure, Valve are down for free money. If spending an extra 10 minutes filtering their item selection process increases player contentment and nets higher revenue, they've proven that they'll heed that call. But the moment they actually have to put their nose to the grindstone, not leech off the community, and work, they're unwilling to do it. Now, people think that's because TF2's revenue has remained consistent despite the botting crisis. And if you just took a couple of hours of revenue out of Valve's yearly budget, they would need to act by fixing TF2. But really, that just isn't true. The discrepancy in TF2's revenue from 2017, a major update year, and 2019, a comparatively barren year, was a bigger blow to the balance sheets than 10 community boycotts. And how did Valve respond to that impact on their balance sheet? That massive drawdown in TF2's revenue. Did they invest more resources into TF2 to bring that revenue dip back to a point of equilibrium? No, they left that shit out to rot because whatever revenue void the lack of updates would create, they would get back in multiples by devoting that manpower towards bigger earners. And keep in mind, this lost revenue was a much bigger percentage of Valve's total revenue stream than anything the community could inflict today. On top of the fact that they already had another update planned and they still left us out to dry. You want to talk about budgeting concerns. You want to talk about TF2's balance sheet being in the red. You want to talk about a hole in the revenue stream forcing them to act? They've been here before, and their solution was not to keep growing the dandelion, but to cut it down and start growing corn instead. Like, let me be clear, I'm not saying that Valve wouldn't notice or wouldn't care about a few million in revenue each year, but what I am saying is they're way more likely to do what they've done previously. Patch that hole by improving any of their other revenue streams that don't account for like 1/1000th of their yearly income. Yes, really, revenue-wise, we are that tiny for this company. Valve could invest in developing a state-of-the-art anti-cheat for a 17-year-old game, or they could just, I don't know, do some marketing bullshit for Counter-Strike, a game that makes more money in 1 month than TF2 does in 5 years, and as long as they boost their sales by literally 1% for 1 year, the next 3 to 4 years of TF2 boycotts would be invalidated, assuming the morale would even be there by that point. That is just one of the numerous other ways that Valve could clog that revenue hole with way less effort. And because we're dealing with Valve, that's obviously the route they're going to go. And sure, is there a chance that Valve would decide to fix TF2 based on losing this minuscule amount of money? It's possible, there's a chance, and that's why once there was no theoretical or practical downside, going this route was always going to be worth trying. But the unwavering confidence people had in the efficacy of a boycott, the definitive language, the blanket statements, in my opinion, it was all needlessly hyperbolic and massively overblown. Until now. Yeah, for all the boycott bros in the back, Listen up. I may have pissed on your bonfire a bit, but allow me to reignite it for you. Supposedly, TF2's current anti-cheat has been worked on for quite a while by one contractor working part-time. There's also testimony that the contractor personally asked Valve if he could work on fixing the bot problem. He wasn't motioned by any higher-ups at Valve first and foremost. That falls in line with the level of investment that Valve has for their backburned IPs, so I'm inclined to believe it. In any case, what we can confirm is that what has been implemented as of now isn't your typical bot ban wave, but the fruits of a new system that is finally seeing the light of day. Now, does this mean the bots aren't going to come back? I find that very hard to believe. However, what this has done for the community is given the player base a much stronger bargaining position should we choose to dangle that financial carrot over Valve's head. Now, we're not asking for a fresh out-of-the-box anti-cheat that requires a shitload of man-hours to develop. That part's already done. Instead, if the bots ever do return, we're simply asking for one iteration, one patch to fix whatever workaround the bot hosters managed to figure out. That is a way more reasonable demand proportional to the amount of monetary damage we can inflict. And because of this, I'd argue the likelihood that Valve would actually go out of their way to enact a comparatively tiny fix has been upped quite a fair bit. Now, opinions on when to boycott, how to boycott, and what to boycott will vary from player to player, but I think everyone should be excited over the fact that no matter the method you're going with, the chance you'll actually make a difference has gone up. That being said, I'd like to offer my perspective on how we as a community should act as we move towards doing a boycott. Follow it or not, I'm just sharing my thoughts. Number 1. Don't jump to conclusions. If there's anything that's embodied TF2 discourse over the past forever, it's that the community can't help itself from getting amped up or hopelessly defeated over whatever info was drip-fed to us that morning. It's very likely that the bot hosters do come back, and when that day comes, don't call it quits immediately. No developer is gonna have a solution instantly. Give it some time and adjust expectations accordingly. This goes in the opposite direction too, by the way. If the bots come back with a tricky workaround yet still manage to get banned pretty quickly, that is cause for confidence, yes. But we still have miles to trek before we're out of the woods completely. Number 2, don't expect any communication. I've seen a lot of people say that the only way they'll ever forgive Valve and come back to the game is if they come out with a written apology or a verbal promise to continue banning bots. If that's the case, you're never coming back. Valve, and in fact a lot of companies, don't tend to comment on the details surrounding their anti-cheat measures. They don't want to draw any more negative attention towards themselves. I recommend looking at their actions and actions only. Treat them as an unwritten declaration of their willingness to upkeep the game. Number 3. The specifics really don't matter. One thing I've noticed with increasing frequency is the amount of people tying their boycott standards to a specific amount of time. And while that's a good starting point, it shouldn't be the end-all and be-all. It could very well be the case that Valve goes ham on patches for the first week or two, bots are dealt with entirely, and there's literally no more possible evidence you can get from sitting around. I say we look at what Valve does. Are they banning bots? Are they going after known cheaters? Are new accounts getting zapped instantaneously? I'd personally view 3 weeks of consistent action as a stronger sign than 3 months of interspersed changes. Though in fairness, it's possible that with the system they got right now, that's all they'd need. I'd say don't draw any hard lines in the sand quite yet. We don't know where the coastline will be next month. Number 4, drop the moral high ground. Look, here are the facts. It's likely that the vast majority of the TF2 player base who actively spend money on the game will not boycott the summer update. Whether they can't help themselves from buying the new cases, people who want to boycott but will cave to the FOMO, people who think the evidence now is good enough, whatever the case may be, we have to accept that the majority of revenue that the update will generate will remain untouched, whether the bots come back or not. And while that may upset a lot of players, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. People by and large prioritize their own enjoyment above all else. We all do this. It's why every single long-term boycott ends up failing in spectacular fashion. I'm not a big fan of factory farming, workers pissing in bottles, Chinese sweatshops, or anti-Semitism, right until I want to make some chicken legs using my Amazon air fryer in $8 pajama pants while listening to Kanye West. fact is, we all support shitty companies to bolster our own lives and the enjoyment we get from them. And carving a tiny little box around TF2 where you get to act morally sanctimonious, to me, is fucking stupid. Boycott if you wish. Exercise your consumer right. I personally encourage it for no other reason than testing Valve's bluff. But I'm not gonna get on my high horse and tell people that they're wrong for wanting to maximize their own perception of fun. Because with even a moment of introspection, you'll realize that you do the exact same shit with other elective pursuits that you don't need to engage in either. And number 5, ironically, don't listen to YouTubers. Yes, that includes me. The only reason why this movement and the original Save TF2 popped off is because we all kept waiting and waiting for people to organically make a change. Despite years and years of outcry, it never happened. So we had to manufacture one ourselves. No one should be making decisions about how they spend their time or where they put their money based on whether or not TFTuber number 8 told you to do so. At the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of losers who found themselves in a position of influence. Never let strangers on the internet dictate what you want to do with your life. And if that means a widespread boycott never props up again, then the community willed it so. But until then, say a prayer and let the good times roll. I think Gandhi said that once. I haven't changed my review back yet, but with good behavior, who knows? See ya.